Good afternoon to you all, beloved viewers of DMRTV, sharing the light of hope. Welcome to yet another interesting edition of our program, Vocation Corner. Today, with me is Reverend Father Moses Tazo, one who has always been there for us and with you and for you, always very, very disposed to talk much about the vocation life, the life to the priesthood, vocation as a whole, dishing from his world of experience, because he is someone who has served over 4 decades as a priest and currently in active service, over 40 years as a priest, in fact close to 44 years as a priest in active service in the Lord's vineyard. And so whenever Father speaks, he always speaks, from his reservoir of experience, and someone who has actually lived the priesthood this far and is still in active service. Good afternoon to you, Father, and you are welcome.
Thank you, Father. It's a pleasure to be here once again to share my life as a priest and to see what role the priest plays in the media and especially in the church of our time where we are now, and perhaps how we were some time ago when we were living at a different time. What has changed and what remains the same.
Thank you so much, Father. Thank you. We are happy to have you here again once more. And I am your host, Father Martin NJIE. Today, we shall be looking at the priest in his time. The priest in his time. We are actually focusing on the priest, but we know that there are various vocations. We also have the religious who are nuns, some are brothers, some are sisters in the church. But our standard of measurement, our canon of measurement here will be the priest in his time. We shall be looking at the priest in his time. Talking about time, when one is delivered in this world, he starts existing in time. He lives in time. And it is said the priest does not carry out his priestly role or ministry in a vacuum. And talking about who a priest is, we remember that in his post-synodal apostolic exhortation, that is that of John Paul II of blessed memory, Pastores Dabos Vobis, I will give you shepherd. The Holy Father of blessed memory, John Paul II, highlighted who a priest is, drawing from the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 5, verse 1. And the Holy Father said, as scripture says, that a priest, every high priest is chosen from among men, and is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, which means a priest is chosen among men and he is appointed to work among men in a relation to God, as the Holy Father says. And this is clearly affirmed by the letter to the Hebrews in chapter 5, verse 1. And this human character of a priest must confirm with the character of God, because a priest acts in the person of Christ, in persona Christi, capitris and in alter Christus, another Christ. He comes from the human community. This is very glaring. Priest does not come from the vacuum. He comes from the human community and is at the service of mankind, imitating and emulating the ways of Christ himself, who was tempted like any other human being, but did not sin. And who lived, Christ who lived like any other human being, shared in the human nature, except sin. Now, looking at the caption of today's discussion, the priest in his time. Now, Father, I want you to look at the priest, perhaps back in the 15th century, not going deep or beyond the 15th century. We can still go beyond, but let's begin from the 15th century, coming up to the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st century. It is but normal that, as per our studies, priests were held in high esteem. Priests have always been respected, and priests have been seen as direct representatives of God here on earth. Now, Father, as one who has served this long in the priesthood, and as someone who has guided vocation as a vocation director, and as one who has served in various capacities in this diocese as a priest, is there a difference in conception of the priest back or behind in the centuries past and the priest of nowadays? Is there any variation in the conception?
I think, first of all, we are told in the scripture that a priest is called forever according to the order of Melchizedek. A priest remains a priest no matter the time, but how he operates makes the difference. The conception as such, the role of a priest, the function of a priest, not something that will change with time. Maybe in practical terms, something may change, but the conception who a priest is, the way God had in mind when he called some people to follow him in this way, I think it remains in God's mind what he intended and what he's still intending today. We are still the same priests that were called in the first century. Maybe they live at a different time, and there might have been differences in their own time, judging the circumstances of their ministry. But the real person remains the same. But with time, we have seen that because of the changes in history, in the world in which the priest lives, the priest has to also adapt at each time with the age and with the time that he is living. We live with different people, we live with different events in life, and therefore the priest will at each time try to adapt himself according to the circumstances of the time. Especially, we talk about the 15th century, that was a time when there was a crisis in the church, when the Reformation was taking place. At that time too, the priest was on trial, because that was one of the things that brought about that caused Martin Luther, was a priest himself, to kick against the church and to point out certain errors that were in the church. And most of these errors were centered on the priesthood. Now, it was not that at that time it was a different priesthood that Christ knows, or that was supposed to be the image of Christ, was supposed to be to represent Christ. We still represent Christ at that time, but the circumstances in which we live at that time, the priests live at that time, must have caused the church to see things differently and priests to live differently. But even up to now, as I said, the conception of the priesthood, what God intended the priest to be, is still essentially the same thing, because we are doing the same service that God ordained for us. We are still answering the same vocation that the priests of the past were called to do. And tomorrow it will remain the same priest. But with time, at each time, the priest will operate in the way things present themselves, in what is going through the church. Because the church is in the world, the church is not stagnant, the church is moving. And therefore the priest has to move each time with the church, with the time, and with everything. And that's why the fathers of Vatican II said we have to read the signs of the time. And we have to really live according to the signs of the time. Where is the church leading us? Where is Christ leading us? And how is the world, applying themselves to us, or being open to the message which we bring? The message of God remains constant. His call remains constant, but at each time there are bound to be changes, and I think there have been quite a good number of changes, especially after the Second Vatican Council. The image of the priest after the Vatican Council was a bit more clearer and more adaptable to the changing times than it was in the past. Things were somehow stereotyped before the Second Vatican Council. At the Council of Trent, for example, That's the time the church was being was realizing that something was happening. When before they realized, because before the Second Vatican, the Council of Trent realized that there were some abuses in church surrounding the priesthood and the church, which had to be addressed. But by the time they got to sit down in the meeting to address, they were somehow taken unaware. So that time was a difficult time too for the priests, before the Council of Trent, when they met to address the issues in the church that were concerning the priesthood. All the same, even though it was a bit late, but they still did something to make sure that this image of the priesthood remains. And the Second Vatican II, it was more open to the world, and people began to understand the priesthood more, I think even better, because the priest was now more, was more open to the world than before. Mm-hmm. I think before they were somehow reserved to themselves, and somehow like standing alone and serving people from a distance. The Second Vatican said, we are all the priests and the people of God are all called to live, the gospel, slightly in a different aspect, but the priest has his rule, the lay people have their rule. This time we are going to work together. Before then, it was like the priest was all and all. So it was a very different image when the priests, people somehow folded their hands to see the priest do things for them, or tell them what to do. But I think with time became clearer that the priest is called for others, and he's called to work with others. He cannot work alone, he cannot live alone, therefore he has to live with people that he serves. So the phases of the church for the priesthood began to change gradually. But I think with time, up to now, each time there might be changes, each time there might be new things coming into the priest's life, but I think the priest will ever remain who he is. The notion of priesthood remains, but the application of that notion of who the priest is will change with time. It has changed with time, and may continue to change with time to adapt to changing situations in life and in the church, especially in the world in which we live. This is a different world. Even when I look at 40 years back, it's not the same world. It's the same way in a way, but many things have changed in the church and in the world. And so the priest who is being carried along, who is supposed to lead this world, will also be bound to adapt to changes along the line.
Thank you so much, Father. Thank you so much for that depth description as per the priest in his time. And Father made mention of the fact that this is a different world. The priest who lives in this world should be aware of the fact that he is living in a different world. We shall come to know why Father says that. Perhaps he's going to give us insights about that. And mentioning Vatican Council II, which says, Apparite portas Christus, open wide the door for Christ, open wide the church, so that at least fresh air could come into the church with regard to, participation in the church, communion in the church. This oneness we know of diversity of ministry in the church, but unison in mission. We have various ministries, but we have the same mission, and that is Christ, and to propagate the love of Christ. Now, Father made mention of the fact that adaptation to the current time, to the present time, is very, very important. In fact, I highlighted the word adaptation because we are looking at the priest in his time. Now, the priest nowadays, is the priest given the same respect? Is the priest held in high esteem nowadays as it was before, perhaps, say, 3, 4, 5 centuries behind? Is the priest given that inestimable joy and respect he merits as it was some 5 centuries behind? And so, Father, I want us to look at it with this dimension, because you have made it categorically clear that in terms of the priest as per, possessing the priesthood, there is no change. The former priest and the present priest, as long as one was ordained, that is, rightly consecrated and set apart aside for ministry, as the letter to the Hebrews says, from the community and back to the community, that character of the priesthood remains, despite changing times. That there is no dispute, there is no gainsaying about that. It's proven beyond reasonable doubt. A priest is a priest. But Father, before we proceed, I would like us to look at it at this dimension. Initially, prior to, the Council of Trent and even coming up to the Second Vatican Council, we know that there weren't formation houses, that is seminaries as we have nowadays, convents to train the young as we have it nowadays, specifically formation houses, major seminaries. In fact, tutorship was done at the feet of elderly priests. And nowadays we have formation houses. Now, could this be a point or a factor of influence with regard to how the priest of the past was seen and considered, and now how the priest of our present time is seen and considered? Are there remarkable differences with regard to this, considering the fact that initially priests used to, were groomed from the feet of other priests? They used to live with the other priests at the parish, elderly priest, and the elderly priest would tell them, this is how you live as a priest, this is what you do, this is how you can celebrate the sacrament. But with time, with the Council of Trent and with the Second Vatican Council, emphasis was laid on formation houses, a seminary. Could this bring about a change as a way, the perception or the view of priests?
I think at a time when priests were being mentored by other priests in the presbytery, at that time there were not many priests. The new ones were in formation were not many, so they could get enough priests in the parishes to work with, to bring them up. I think the one advantage at that time would have been that they were very close to somebody who could, work along with them. It's like they were being trained on the workshop instead of trained in isolation. Then they are brought into the field. So they were being trained on the field, which was an advantage. But sometimes you can have a priest who may have a problem with personality, and for him to form somebody there may be a bit of problem. Anyway, of course, in those days, it's not every priest who was appointed for that. Just a few priests who were choosing now to bring up the younger ones. But I think one advantage was that they grow up really knowing who a priest is and how a priest lives his life. Now the seminary is now a school. And in the school, you have, first of all, the numbers are many now. You can't even afford to train them individually. And when they come together sometimes, although it's an advantage when they come together to study as an institution, but sometimes in an institution, some people, the world say they lie low. You may not get to know individuals as you should know them. And because of that, sometimes the formation may not be very solid for some people who are not, sometimes talk about low learners, those who cannot catch up easily. So it might have been solid, but it might have taken time to form as many priests as Bishop may like to have. But as I said, that personal touch, that closeness must have been very good at that time to form somebody, so that you know exactly what you are supposed to do, and you learn it by doing it yourself on the spot. But I think along the way, when we get now into institutions, as I say, institutions, sometimes we don't get to know people very detailedly. You don't have that personal contact one-on-one as you would have had it before. But all the same, I think what is important is that whether you form as an individual or by a person, the church knows what they want for their priest. It's the church that defines how a priest should be formed, what a priest should be, according to the mind of Christ. We are supposed to form according to the mind of Christ, so that either as individual or in a institution, I think the church all tries to make sure that they respond to what Christ wants for his church. What kind of person does he want? And I think when instruments were being opened, there was also the question that sometimes when you come together in the group, sometimes when there's a conflict of personalities,
Yes.
then there's a problem there. So somebody who might have looked on Christ as the exemplar, he might tend to look at an individual as, determining factor for his life. But we as well to a pattern after Christ. Anybody who was coming information, could be somebody who was giving information, is only trying in his own way to give this image of Christ to whoever is information. And along the line, I think the church has learned a lot from the experience that they get over the ages, over time, that since they are clear on their mind what is expected of a priest, they try to make sure that they get people who are really qualified to do the job. You may not be 100% sure,
Yes.
but the church is still making an effort to make sure they give the priest what is expected of him, what he wants, he's supposed to know, and how he's supposed to function. But it may, in big numbers, sometimes it may not have, the quality may not be as same as it would have been. But all the time, as we have to meet up with time, with changing times, and all what's important is that the individual who is coming forward to live this life must all the time look up to Christ. Whether learning at home or in an institution, the point is the Christ remains the same person, and all of us are looking up to him. And I think we have more to gain when you have people come together to study together, to work together, because in the ministry they have to work together, they have to live together. So I think there's more advantage this time with formation houses. There's more opportunity this time to train more priests and to make them to live as a family, even if in practice that doesn't happen. But I think they are making that effort to make sure that as we grow up together, we work and live together, and we make the church what Christ wants it to be. The different methods, I think that they were good at their own time, at different time, and the methods are different because we are living at a different time and have to adapt to the time that in which we are living. So right now, all that we have to do is, how can we make our seminaries the real place to form the priests? How can we bring out the same kind of priests that we had in the past? You cannot have two put the same, but you can, to some extent, we can say we are trying to maintain the standards. We are trying to keep to what is expected of Christ. Somebody after the heart of Christ. That is what is important. And I think at different times, the church has done that they can to give that image of a priest, to maintain that image of priest, and to make sure that the mission of the priest is being fulfilled by whoever is being called to do that. Whether yesterday or today, the mission somehow remains the same. But at different times, we have to see how we can adapt to the changing times. The core character remains there. The mission remains there. The mission too changes with time. And therefore, the individual also has to adapt to the changing conditions and the different aspects of the pastoral work as it presents itself along the line. But I was just thinking, when I was just thinking about the crisis that we had in the 60s.
Yes, Father.
I think that is where the priesthood had the greatest challenge.
Yes.
Not only for those who were living at that time, but for those who were following. I mean, when you think of the chunk of priests that left at the same time, it was a challenge for them who were living at the time and those who were looking forward.
Yes.
I remember when we began studies in Bambui, we had a book, Introduction to Theology. This book was the only reference book we had at that time. Then one day in the class, we were told that priest who wrote that book has left the ministry.
Yes.
Many of us never went back to that book for reference. It's like And not only leaving the priesthood, they said he left, I was not even coming to church.
Coming, you see.
So I asked myself, what he wrote there, is it the truth? Is that what we can use as an example?
Yes.
But at the time he wrote that, he did it all with all his might.
Yes.
And the church saw that what he wrote and what he lived was what was expected of him, of a priest.
All right.
But when times were changing, something happened in the church, and the crisis came, and somehow some people lost the dignity of the priesthood,
yes,
the image of the priesthood.
Exactly.
And of course, people have to be shaken at that time. But thank God, the priesthood still remained.
Okay.
It suffered some challenges, but the priesthood still remains today what it should be. How it is today is a different question. But I think all in all, the Christ does not leave his church alone. He keeps guiding us in such a way that we continue to follow in his footsteps even when the challenges come. So it's left to us at each age to say, how are we keeping to the directives of the church according to the mind of Christ? All of us have to answer that question. It's not that there are not ready answers anywhere.
Yes.
But at each time, we have to ask ourselves, are we on the right track? Are we following the mind of Christ? Are we training the priests according to the mind of the church? And how are they trying to live their time? How are they trying to adapt to where they are? How are they living the priesthood in the way that they make sure that they are serving Christ and serving his people?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Father, for that elaborate explanation. Worthy of note is the fact that irrespective of the era, irrespective of the epoch from which a priest is trained or lives, what is worthy of note is that the priest should be trained and should act after the mind of Christ, should emulate the mind of Christ, as Father did mention. Now, in the second segment of this presentation, talking about the priest in his time, we shall look concretely the whole aspect of communication, and with regard to communication, we shall examine the use of gadgets, various, media of communication, the use of gadgets, and then we'll try to make a comparative analysis on how the priests nowadays, on how religious nowadays, on how those who are living their vocation in the present time, adapt themselves such that they are not derailed, such that they are not deviated from their call and vocation. Then we try to look at the past. How was it in the past when these, gadgets, these various media of communication were not there? So we try to make a comparative analysis and look at a proposal, a way forward on how one can live his vocation at the current, with the present time, without deviating from the normal after that heart of Christ. So for now, we shall take a musical break and we shall come back soonest. Welcome back, beloved viewers of DMRTV. If you are just joining us, you are live onto our program, Vocation Corner, whereby we bring to you much about vocation, the call of God, the voice of God, and how we live our vocation in our various works of life, as long as we recognize the purpose and mission of God in our life, and we put him at the forefront as a motivating factor behind all that we do, think, or say. This afternoon, you have been in the company of myself, Father Martin, and Father Moses Tazo, who has always answered the present to give us his world of experience as one who has lived for over 4 decades as a priest and currently in active service in the Lord's vineyard. Today we have been looking at the priest in his time. The priest in his time, in his current situation, changing to the present reality and adapting, as Father has been using the word adaptation. And of course, that what is essential, as highlighted by Father, is that irrespective of the epoch or era where a priest, a non, a religious, finds his or herself, he must try as much as possible to live and work after the heart of Jesus Christ. And this is emphasized in the post-synodal apostolic exhortation of John Paul II of blessed memory, Pastores Dabo Vobis. I will give you shepherds, pastors, after my own heart. Now, at this second segment of our program, I would like us to look at the priest with regard to the changing times, with a consideration of the use of the media and the communication. Father Moses, you bear eloquent testimony with me that the world in which some of us grew and are still in, and we were formed as seminarians and becoming priests, is quite different from the world in which you grew and you were formed and which you became a priest. Now we shall be focusing on communication. Is there a clear-cut disparity or distinction with regards to how communication actually flowed or unfolded in your times as a priest, as a seminarian, and those who are formed nowadays? Is there any difference?
I think the first thing is the media is a blessing to the church. Communication has become easier now, faster. You know, we can easily reach many people within a short time. I think we can say, thank God that the media has come. At our time, we have very little opportunities to use the media. So we have to travel long distances where we could have just sit in the house and things will be done. We look at the television now. There's somebody you can reach within a short time at a long distance. And also, there are various ways of what we can, various media organs that we are using today. 62 years ago, precisely in this diocese and the province of Bamenda, we had only the Cameroon Panorama at the time. And it served its own purpose at that time, and it did a lot to propagate the faith. Now, with time now, we have come up with the radio, we have the television, and we also have all sorts of gadgets we can use to proclaim the word of God. So I must say there's so much advantage today. But what is important now is how do we make use of that, these various means of communication.
Yes.
And when I look at these golden opportunities, I start asking myself, how well are we making good use of it? In our times, we didn't have the opportunities. Now the opportunities are there, but sometimes some of the priests are slow in making use of these means of communication.
Yes.
I think example of Cameroon Panorama, where I worked for some time, and
Yes.
I know in those days we could produce 3,000 copies of Cameroon Panorama, and it sold at hotcakes.
Yes.
No problem. Because the priests were interested, the priests could disseminate the copies. You just send the copies to your parishes, they send you the money, and it was easy. It was a thing for every priest. Every priest was happy to have panorama in their parishes, and then they would sell and send the money to the bishop's house.
Yes.
That cooperation made panorama to go wide and to propagate the faith. But nowadays, you find that some priests are not interested in communication. We have all the facilities that we can have to preach the gospel, but for some people, they are either lukewarm or they are not prepared to make use of what they have. Many are making the effort, and we are seeing the improvement that is taking place. We have just listened to these priests evangelizing through music.
Yes.
Those are things we didn't have those days.
Yes.
But they are aware that any priest can use any of the means of communications to reach his people within a short time. But as I said, some are not responding. Even, you see, when I come here, somehow, when I grew up in it, I got to like it. And I still like it up to now. And but I find that you have a young priest who's talented, who may have the ability to use the media, but I don't know. They have other interests other than that. And for me, at this present time, there's no other thing you can hang on to, because that helps you to do other things which you should have done. It's an opportunity to grow even as an individual, yes. to educate yourself and to educate other people.
Yes, Father.
But that interest, sometimes I see that interest lacking. Mm-hmm. Some of us were interested, but we didn't have the opportunities. Yes. Now, many even have the opportunity to study, to get to know how to use those media. I didn't have that opportunity. There are some of them whom I would love to know how to do them, but I don't have, it's not ready for me now to learn some of those things. Yes. But I think if we have had these opportunities for the priests of today, they should make that effort to see what they can do to use the media to propagate the faith. Mm-hmm. And the one small negative thing that I've seen about this media is that it's making some priests to withdraw to themselves. It's like they like what they can get from the media, but they keep it to themselves. What I mean is that now, when we began, let's say when television just came, maybe we had only one in the presbytery, 3 priests having one television, but we had a common room where we always go there. And when we go there to listen to news, yes, we chat other things, we live as a family.
Communal life, community, as
yes,
communion.
We share experiences of the pastoral work. Yes. But now that because of the media, everybody has his own television in his house, that family spirit is lost. It's lost. So the media was supposed to be a means of bringing us together and working together, and working more together is somehow making some people isolated and working on themselves without asking how can somebody else benefit from what I'm benefiting. I think that spirit has to come. I think young priests who have all the training now, because some of them are trained in those things before they come out. Yes. Let them try to realize that this is an opportunity we should not miss. It's an opportunity we should use to grow grow in our vocation, and also growing in forming our own people, those people whom we are supposed to preach to. Let's see how we can make the media more available to our Christians who really need these things, and some of them who are distant, who are housebound, but they need to be reached. And we can only reach them through the media, because the media is moving before us. Okay.
Thank you so much, Father. Father, while you were speaking, I was just listening. You did more of an appraisal of the media, but for the fact that at least the last point you cited one of the demerits, one of the disadvantages brought about by the media, such that the media has influenced some religious, some priests, some lay faithful, and so many people to kind of withdraw to themselves. They are always, kind of being introverted. It's difficult now to come out to be, that communal dimension which used to be experienced by especially the priest of the past is like kind of lacking presently. Now, Father, there has always been this, deep and, heated debate about the fact that the media is like causing more harm than good nowadays. And I want us to look at this caption and these points vis-a-vis alongside the priest now in his time. Come to think of it, in the days of Father John Meriviani, Cure d'Ars, and who was known as someone who was very spiritual, who could sit in the confessional for close to more than 14 hours and so on, listening to confession and even doing penance for others. Come to think of the fathers of the faith, some prelates, the fathers of the church, saints, some spiritual giants, Philip Neri, Ignatius of Loyola and his spiritual exercises and Ignatian meditation and the rest, just to name a few. And nowadays, can we say if those priests lived nowadays with the presence of the media, they could be this, renowned with regards to their spiritual asceticism, spiritual in-depth?
Yeah, I think we are losing so much. Priests are losing so much of their prayer life, for example, the sense of dedication, making themselves coming closer to God. The media has taken many people away from that communion with God. When you mention somebody like John Meriviani,
yes,
who couldn't even cope in the seminary, he couldn't recite,
exactly.
Intellectually, he was nothing.
Yes.
He could have been kept out, but because because of his limitedness, he knew that he was limited in his intelligence in everything. But he knew that he could, with God, coming close to God, he knew everything, and he had everything what it takes to be a priest and what it takes to touch people's lives. So I think one disadvantage about the media is that we are so buried in it that we don't have time with God. It's like the media has become our God. That's where we spend most of our time, and we don't have time to pray. And I think, in spite of, we have to see the media as an instrument when we need it. It's not all and all for us. It's not something like the whole day I have to be with it. There's a time where I must turn away from the media and turn to God. That's another thing that's missing now. The time that we have spent with God, we spend on the media. And there's no way you can make use of that media if you have not first have time with God. Because what are you giving out to the media? You may have the means to give out, you have the stuff, but do you have the what the people need to receive? Are you giving the people what they need? And you cannot give them unless you withdraw to yourself and withdraw with you to live with God. Which the media somehow is neglecting these days. Sometimes the television is on in the house from morning to night.
Tonight, yes.
When do you pray? When do you meditate?
That's the point.
And your phone is always there.
Yes.
Sometimes people they tell me somebody just got. I've got a few people are annoyed with me.
Yes.
They ask whether this is a mobile phone or a stationary phone.
A stationary phone.
Say, well, man, they call me, I don't pick my phone.
Yeah, not available.
I'm not available. There are times that I use a phone, and it's still because the party I grew up with. I never had that phone for most of the time. It's something I just came now. Before it came now, I knew I had my priorities. But now, when people just grow up and get into these things, it become part and parcel of them, and they neglect the most important thing, which means that communication with God is losing its favor. We are more communicating with gadget than with God. And that's what the eight fathers, that's where they had an advantage. That when they communicate, when they live with God, their influence even went as far as you can imagine.
Yes.
Mean, everybody in Europe came there to confession from
yes.
other parts of Europe to come to have confession to him.
Yes.
And he sat there 24 hours
yes.
in confessional. He was not tired, and he touched many lives.
Many lives, that's it. Mm-hmm. That's it.
So communication is a good thing, but it can also be a barrier. It's also a barrier if we don't use them correctly and we don't know when to use them.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Father. Thank you for that deep input. What of note is the fact that, like Father said, abuse cannot take away the use. Father is someone who has worked for long in the communication service of the Diocese of Boya. And if he's speaking still, he's speaking from his world of experience. And so, to all priests, to all religious, to all faithful, we are all expected to make good and proper use of the media, especially when it comes to communication. But that should not actually influence negatively our prayer life, because a priest, a child of God, one who has a vocation, must adapt to the changing times. It's worthy of note that it is very, very important to communicate, but how are we disposed to use these gadgets for, or which are meant or available for our disposal in terms of communication? Are we so much submerged into them such that even time for our prayer is a difficulty? We should all sit up and take proper note of that. Father, we have just a few minutes, just about 3 minutes to go. And before we go, I would like you to highlight to us a few key moments in your ministry where perhaps you had some kind of blackout, some challenges. I mean, in relation to our caption of discussion today, the priest in his time, some key moments.
Yeah, I think the one that strikes me now is when I had to burn out in Fiango. That was my second party that I was working in. And when I was in Fiango, my program was tight. You know, Fiango extended right to Guti.
Yes.
We used to call it Manfred Road. And when you really want to do a good, pastoral work, you have to be out for 10 days to cover that road.
Yes.
I was with 2 white priests. You couldn't make that journey. So as a young priest and also an African with the energy I had, I was the only one doing that 10 days journey, 10 days pastoral work. The big places, they can go there on Sunday, say 2 masses and come back. But to make sure that every station gets a service within a time, let's say in a month, I have to do the 10 days. Now, and when I come back, I was also giving lectures in the novitiate, St. Teresa of the Child Jesus novitiate in Kumba. So this particular week, I came back after the 10 days, and since I stayed more than a week, I missed a class. So I was not going to give a double class. So I had to prepare my notes now for 2 hours. So I prepared, which means maybe I slept only for 2 hours. After that long journey, and I will have to go to teach. I slept only about 2 hours. Then I went there I gave my lectures. After 2 hours, I finished the class. Then I sat in the parlor. Sisters, I should take some juice. So as we were preparing the juice, I just sat down waiting for her. She brought the juice and kept it in a glass. Then she left. I sat there. I couldn't lift up my hand to carry that glass.
Yes.
I didn't know what was happening, but I just sat down. Gradually, I came back to myself. Then I took the glass, drank the juice, and I felt coming back to life.
Yes.
Now, that was a warning, which I didn't even realize what was happening. So after some time, one day in the house, in Fiango, we had the toilet down the bungalow. So as I was going down, my eye just turned. I didn't know what was happening. I just have to hold the rails as I was going down. I just leaned on it, and when there was some time, then it passed away. I still didn't know what happened.
Yes.
But I knew that something happened. So after some time, I was not more sleeping. I was getting tired unnecessarily, even when I don't go to the Manfred Road. So at one point, I told the bishop that I don't know what was happening. So he asked me to go to Shison Hospital, where I stayed there. While I was there, they did all the checking medically. They didn't see anything. Just to cut the story short. Then some sister was saying that he ran away from work.
Yes.
I come to high year so that you're eating from the convent. So when I got to hear that, I just packed my thing and came down to supper. So I didn't understand what was happening with me. They didn't understand. So when I came down, Bishop took me to Douala, to Lankane Hospital. Dr. Eben was there. and he gave me acupuncture that to put on my head. I slept for the first time after a long time. On that bench where they did, I slept there until. So after that, I was staying in the procure for 2 weeks, going to see him now and again. So after the 2 weeks, I came back now to Bishop's house. Then from there, I was posted to Moika. Then when I went to Bamada for something, I met Archbishop Paul. So I was sharing my experience. Even my Bishop Pius didn't, he himself couldn't understand what was happening. So when I met Archbishop Paul and I was sharing my experience, he's the person who gave me the name. That was a burnt out.
Okay.
Because he himself had experienced it, he had had it. So that was a moment I can say I really knew what it means walking without resting.
That's true.
That's nothing. The priesthood, you can give yourself so much to eat that you forget your own personal health.
Yes.
And when you do that, you know that you even lose more time without walking. So I learned from that. And once you have that kind of experience, you have to be careful with your life all along. Anytime that you strain up, you go through depression or stress, it comes back. So that's something that I have to live on for some time. So that's why from time to time I have to make sure I have a good rest for it not to come back.
All right. Thank you so much, Father. Thank you. That was a key moment in Father's pastoral ministry where he actually experienced some blackout. Dear viewers, you have been in the company of myself, Father Martin NJIE, and Father Moses Tazo for our program Vocation Corner. And today we have been examining the priest in his time. Worthy of note is the fact that a priest is anointed, consecrated, and chosen from among the people and sent back to work with the people and to carry out the sacrifice, the holy oblation for the people and for the forgiveness of sins and for himself. And it is worthy of note that the priest must adapt to the changing times, adapt to the media communication. But the priest and anyone who embraces their life to live a vocation, as a religious, even as a faithful in our various works of life, we must take note of the fact that the media should not derail us, should not deviate us, should not distract us from our prayer life. The priesthood is not a bed of roses. As Father said, there are so many challenges.